everybody, and welcome to another iteration of the Liminal Podquest. After a year of going a bit cuckoo in lockdown and searching desperately for answers, and a surge in virtual yoga and meditation classes, and an explosion of spirituality-themed memes on the internet, we wanted to take you into an inquiry into mature spirituality and what this means. But because spirituality is such a slippery and shape-shifting thing, instead of clipping its wings with descriptive rigor, I'd like to approximate the essence of today's session with some words from famous poet-activist Maya Angelou. We, this people, on a small and lonely planet, traveling through causal space, past aloof stars, across the way of indifferent suns, to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. When we come to it, we, this people, on this wayward floating body, created this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where every man and every woman can live freely, without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. So let's see where the devilish, the divine, feeling, faith, indigeneity, the sacred, the stars, and the spirit will take us.
So on this journey, first of all, hello, everyone. I'm Chiara, and that was Ivan. And thank you again to be with us and to follow us on our investigations and inner and outer journeys. And so today we will be accompanied by two very special guests. The first one is usually introduced as a mother, activist, indigenous elder, and ceremonial leader from the Diné or Navajo tribe from Turtle Island, which, for those who don't know, is an ancient name to call North America. But she's much more than that. She's also a badass representative of the female side of the five-fingered ones and the fierce messenger of the original instructions, reminding us how to live in cooperation and co-creation with Mother Earth. An untamed warrioress in defense of the original plan of this planet, which is life and more life and more life. Please welcome Woman Stands Shining, Pat McCabe. Hello, Pat.
Greetings, thank you.
Thanks to be with us today.
I'm really happy to be with you today.
And so our second guest is a husband and father, a psychologist, an author, a speaker, originally from the Yoruba tribe from Nigeria. But he's also the embodiment of radical fugitivity from the constraints of the oppressive familiar, a slayer of Anthropocenic dreams of dominance, digging deep into the cracks of normality opened by climate change or the pandemic, to help us hope that our normal will never be the same again. Please welcome Bayo Akomolafe.
Glad to be here. Slayer, I love that part.
Good to have you both here.
Thank you.
We had Pat at Liminal Village in Boom in 2018, and Bayo was supposed to be hosted by Liminal Village in 2020. Some things got into the way of large global events. And now we find ourselves in a perhaps paradoxical position where contemporary science is virtually connecting us all to talk about spirituality. And we have 4 different time zones. I know Chiara is in
Relíquias, Portugal.
And Pat, you are in?
I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Southwest.
Albuquerque, I get to say Albuquerque. And Bayo, you are joining us from?
Chennai, India.
All right, so we literally have good morning, good afternoon, good day,
and good night.
And we might end up somewhere in good night. So yeah, interconnectivity. Let's get going.
So the first question I would like to ask you is if you would like to share with us something about your origins, your geographical, cultural, and spiritual roots, and how does it inform your worldview and your work? Pat, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting question right now because I'm in my mama's house, and this is the house that I also was a teenager in. And my mom just turned 97 in January, so we've been lockdown buddies here for a bit, and it's a really special time actually for us, very precious time. So I think, you know, for me, being in New Mexico is sort of like being a part of the United States and sort of like not being part of the United States. It's the culture here is has so many different indigenous peoples here, and then we have a really fairly, well, maybe not by other countries' standards, but for the United States, it's unique that we have a Spanish presence here. There's Spanish land grants here that were granted by the King of Spain to families, and those families are still here. So it's been like 600 or 700 years. So it's a pretty unique culture, you know, and you know, like many people, I sort of, when I was young, I kind of couldn't wait to get out of here and see some other places. And then I traveled to the West Coast and then the East Coast and then to Europe a little bit, and then came back all by the time I was 16. And as I say, it's hard to realize that you're in like the best place, that you started out in the best place. And and so I love being here in New Mexico. I love the desert. I love the mountains. And actually this land is a very healing place for me. So normally I live about 2.5 hours north of here, and it's much more alpine than where my mom is here. So I'm learning about the deeper desert here. But one thing that I've been doing is recognizing that this mountain that's to the east here, right behind my mom's house, you know, I keep really feeling that mountain knew me when my mom brought me home from the hospital. And so I've been really talking to this mountain and presenting myself every day and saying, you know me, you know me, and expressing my gratitude and asking for the input there. So a lot of my spiritual life comes from the landscape here in the high desert and in the low desert of New Mexico, for sure.
And what about the Diné tribe? Would you like to say something about, you know, to someone that maybe have never heard of it? What is it and how does it inform your way of being?
Well, so we call ourselves Diné. People often, as my daughter says, incorrectly know us as Navajo. And so I'm always surprised when I use the word Navajo. People from all over the world recognize that name, and I actually think it's from Hollywood. Like our tribe and our name was represented in some of the movies, I guess. So I'm always surprised at who recognizes that word. But so we are from, we call it the Four Corners area, talking about what's now the 4 states, Colorado, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico. And our traditional territory is between 4 sacred mountains. And to be honest, you know, my grandparents and parents were taken to Dutch Christian Reformed missionary boarding schools early when they were children. And my grandparents met there, and then my parents met in the school too. And so by the time I came along, my family wasn't speaking the language around me and wasn't practicing our culture. So it's something that I've been coming back to in the meantime, between then and now, I was also adopted into the Lakota spiritual way of life, another nation. And that's actually been the basis for my spiritual practice for, I guess it's about 28 years. And so it's kind of been through that way and that walk that I got led back to my own people. And I'm learning. And right now, I'm being called on to be a guardian of some land at the base of one of our sacred mountains. So I'm getting ready to take a much deeper dive into what that really means for me to come home at that level to my own bloodline.
And I'm curious to know, how does the DNA culture, what is its essence? Would you like to say something about some main points of what the beliefs are about and how do they manifest?
I think the key piece, as I see it at this moment, is this concept of original beauty. That we, humanity, come from original beauty, and that there is a harmony that you can always return to. And so that's a big part of the healing modality for us, is to be sung back into harmony. If we come out of balance, if we even if someone has committed a murder, that they can be sung back into harmony and become a part of the people again. And so I realize, especially with this Dutch Christian Reformed Church schooling in my family, and also being raised with the concept of original sin, it's been quite a liberating thing to really feel what it would be like instead to come from original beauty. And so I would say that is one of the core pieces. And again, just life in the desert is a huge aspect of who we are. We've been sheep herders for quite a long time, and so a lot of our songs are about the landscape, but also I think that way. So some of the indigenous people here in New Mexico live very close together, the Pueblo nations here, and like they're literally on top of each other in buildings, and these buildings are ancient buildings, but so they live very close. But my people are spread out. We have one of the largest territories in the United States, and so we're spread out. And so I think there's something very contemplative about our way and our people, because of how much time we spend on the land and out in a more solitary way.
Thank you so much, Pat, for this journey into this reality that you inhabit and that has informed your way of being. And we will have more time in the next questions to also go deeper into these beliefs and this way of looking at the world and this way of becoming in relation with the world. And so maybe Bio, we move to you, and maybe you would like to share something about your origins, your cultural and spiritual roots.
Thank you, Kiara. And it was good listening to my dear sister, Pat. Well, my origin story isn't neat and tidy. It's still emerging. I come from the Yoruba people of West Nigeria. And the Yoruba people are not just in Nigeria, but they're across West Africa. They're a flamboyant, colorful people. I grew up an unwilling recipient of my cultural teachings. You see, because I was also the recipient of this very heavy ontological burden of original sin. And I imagined that my trajectory, my life's purpose was to extricate myself from the leanings and the impediments of cultural desires and teachings and insights, and to ascend, you see, sinless into some pure, or into some pure transcendent space. It wasn't until I started to meet with and sit with Yoruba healers. These are practitioners of the deep arts. They're called babalawos. That I felt a call to revisit my notions of progress, and to stay with the powers that I had discountenanced or dismissed. So that's not to say that I grew up cultureless. there are ways other than language, and that culture grabs you and captures you. I grew up in a very thoroughly Yoruba household. We spoke, my parents spoke Yoruba, but they forbade us. They did not allow us to speak the language, because they also believed that to be educated was to lose, your language and to speak the English language. Till today, my mother says, it was your dad's fault. Your dad was always about his children speaking Queen's English. We're supposed to, and I love my dad to bits, even though he's late, but he was all about that life, all about the English, the imperial order of things. I grew up in a world that had that kind of format. We were left in the wake of colonial departures. All our aspirations were to be like the West, were to be more developed and industrialized. But even in those days, I learned to read our authors, not just Wale Soyinka and Cyprian Ekwensi and Chinua Achebe. These are Nigerian authors, and to learn about the decolonial streams of thought that I had no idea about. I learned to read them, and they ushered me, so to speak, to that moment of encounter, so to speak, the turning point in my origin myth, if you will. And it was at that place of meeting with babalawos, that I learned the deeper story of orishas. The orishas are the superhuman beings, the pantheon of gods, right, in our cosmology. And I learned to speak with their cadence. I learned to see the world through their eyes, and to understand my place in that large ecosystem of imaginings. So that's one aspect of my origin story, I think.
Thank you, Bayo. And also for you, we will have more occasions, another opportunity to learn deeper about all of these in the next questions. So maybe Ivan?
So I would like to shift gears and, as a white guy, make it all about me. So I would say that spirituality doesn't play an important role in my life, at least not consciously. I'm lacking the practice, I lack the connection, the lineage. I'm also aware of my conditioning. I studied natural sciences. I come from a very non-religious family. If anything, there was atheistic dogma. And spirituality always smelled of religion to me. And so I had a rejection of it. But I'm also coming to a point where I'm deeply, genuinely curious about what it is that I'm missing out. And so, Pat, could you give me a couple of ideas about what I'm missing out?
Oh, man. What is he missing out on? Well, I feel, so I went, first of all, I just want to say that I can relate to what Bayo was talking about in his origin so deeply. So it's it's always good to get to hear and know about how things were for you and how similar our stories are that way. But so when I was 14, I got sent to an East Coast boarding school here in what we now call the United States. And I realized that nobody was watching whether or not I was going to church, because all the way up until that point I was going. And I was like, you know, I don't think anybody would know if I did or I didn't. So I chose not to go. And it was a big deal. It was scary. It was really scary. I mean, I had hellfire and damnation right in front of me, you know, and but I didn't, I wasn't getting anything out of it, really. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It was a really mixed thing for me. And so that was my departure at that point when I was 14 from the church. And so if it wasn't the church, then it was like the church or nothing. It was how it felt to me, because I didn't have any other point of reference. And so so I traveled from 14 years old to 28 with just me and whatever I could come up with. You know, it was just me against the world is how it felt. And whatever I could come up with on my own, from my own mind, my own stamina, cunning, everything. And but then I came to this place of, I think, when I began to really understand that I was embedded in a colonial setup, but I wasn't from it, and I wasn't ever going to be what it wanted me to be. My father also was very intent on having us kids, you know, excel in this modern world paradigm. And so, you know, I was supposed to be bound for academic glory and such, and but it was just killing me. East Coast boarding school, I did great at academics, but my heart and soul were dying. So when I was 28, I came to this point of a dead end, I'll say. And I had 2 small children, and I had really started turning towards substance and alcohol pretty heavily. I'd witnessed many other family members go that road. I watched some of my family members die that way. And I realized that I was headed for that. And I had these 2 small children. So I sent a call out, and it was so humiliating to me to send this call out, because I didn't want there to be a God. I didn't want there to be anything beyond me, honestly. And so I sent this call out, and I had no idea what I was calling to. I really had no idea. And I didn't know if anything could hear me, but I just felt like, man, I don't want to die in front of my kids. And so I sent this call out every morning and every night, and for about 2 weeks. And I, at the end of 2 weeks or so, suddenly I didn't want to drink, and I didn't want to do any substance. And I hadn't had a reprieve from that for a long time. Every day, it was a daily thing for me. And so not too long after that, I got invited to my first Lakota ceremony, purification sweat lodge in Ipi. And boy, you know, I found a home, partly because I got to pray with my whole body. There was something so disembodied about being in the church. You know, I had to wear these really uncomfortable clothes. I had little ruffly lace tights that, you know, when you sit on those hard wooden benches, that polyester lace is like digging into your skin, and just everything about it was so uncomfortable. And I had to sit still and just, you know, be good. And that was what I associated with coming before any kind of spiritual being, you know. And so to go into the sweat and to be able to get muddy, to be able to be down in the dirt, to be able to literally sweat, to be able to feel with my whole body, to to feel the drum, to feel the songs, to feel the heat, to feel the steam. There was something about that really spoke to me and reached me. So I kept going back. I didn't know what was going on in there, but I was changing, and I was leaving behind a life of addiction, and something new was happening. And so I guess for me, what I would say is that suddenly this world began to have dimensions and openings that I had no idea had been there before. So it was really like being in a completely different world, because now trees could speak to me, stones could speak to me, and their perception of what it is to be on Earth was so different than human understanding. And so suddenly this world comes alive with mystery and with, I'm going to say, magic. And so, sometimes when I talk to young people, I say to them, it's hard to be in this world when those veils of our perception are shut down through intellect. This place is a hard place to be in when I was walking around in that state. But if I'm willing to explore the possibilities of this world being alive, like so alive, and able to commune with me, and then suddenly this whole world is singing. I don't know. It's a very different place for me since those doors opened, and like I say, it's a very hard place to be when they're slammed shut, which is oddly how most human beings are indoctrinated to view it at this point.
I mean, I'm certainly indoctrinated. I feel like there's an increasing awareness of my indoctrination, but this is why it's important to be on the lookout and talk to people about their experiences. My only call that was ever released, if you could say that, to something, because I did not have a lineage or a religion or a practice to draw upon, was when I was a child. I was about 12 years old, and my mother had a pancreatic attack, and I thought she was dying. And that was the only moment where I ran out of the room and spoke to something with full intention and seriousness, that I didn't know what it could be. But you feel immensely alone. And I didn't also keep up with it, even though my mom survived, uncannily. So again, I abandoned it. It was almost like an extractivist transaction where I asked for something, I was given it, and then I just was like, okay, cool. Life keeps on going. And so I would, because there's so many things we could get into, but I would want maybe Bio to complement Pat's share, and what happens when those doors that are so shut are not available. Like, they're just not, you don't see them even, maybe. What do you do?
What happens which doors? The
doors that indoctrination and conditioning have made invisible as to what are the resources available to you to navigate life. Because my available resources are using scientific approximations and figuring out what it means to be good, maybe in humanism, some books, and conversations with friends and family. That's it. And I feel like it's limiting.
what happens when your righteousness is infected with a virus, and then you have to and then you have to meet the world anew. I think this is a matter of topographical shifts of land as an archive of memories, and spirits and archetypal longings, not just dirt, not just the resource background for humanism to display its experiments of transcendence, but when the world folds in on itself and does things that surprises us. So the traditions that I refer to are traditions that were named pagan, by the obviously wiser English people that came to our lands, and they banished these ideas. And this is rubbish. But they went underground, and that was a place of power for them. To go underground wasn't a place of demise. It was a place of demise, but demise as a place of power, demise as a place of working with the world. Pat spoke about listening to trees, and I listened to Babalawo speak about, you have to interview this plant for that question. I cannot give you the answer to that question. You have to speak to this plant for that question. So this idea that the world isn't some kind of oscillatory indeterminacy. It's constantly animated. It's intelligent, so intelligent that it transcends our very narrow, concrete, linear trajectories, right? That it's large and it's sweltering like a compost heap. It's an ecosystem of ecosystems. And our attempts to reduce it to our anxieties, our crisis definitions, our notions of morality, our purity standards, our tiny yoga bubbles of practices, all of that, is upended by a world that kicks back, a world that surprises us. So when you speak about, so what do I do when the doors? Well, that's probably your lot until the world opens up a door, until the world haunts, because the world is constantly haunting. We just have gotten used to, habituated into thinking of the times when the world knocks on a door as moments to pathologize. For instance, I'm trained as a psychologist, and I shrank people's notions of sanity to exclude indigenous moments, like when the Babalawo told me that what you might call auditory hallucination could be your grandmother or your grandfather trying to be in touch with you. And my nosology, my categorical thinking did not allow space for that. I was so trapped and incarcerated in my bubble of sanity that I did not consider that it might be possible that the world around me is speaking with me, kicking me into doing things, but I don't know how to communicate with it. So what I would say is, yes, we have made tools as modern citizens, but our tools do not stay subservient for so long. One day you might just be surprised that your television set might, yawn and decide to have a word or two. You might find miracles, and I use this word miracles, knowing the background that I come from. Now, I know the background that Pat and I come from. Miracles as an interruption of the ordinary. No, that's not how I think about miracles. Miracles are not the interruption of the ordinary. Miracles are the enrichment, the already enriched ordinary. The ordinary is richer than what we might term the extraordinary. So all around us are opportunities for the modern to disappoint itself, to stray from its algorithms, to find other ways of listening. We are constantly harangued, beleaguered, invited, instigated, haunted, by the more than human around us. And I feel we just need to learn how to listen. We need to learn how to put our ears to the ground, like that Yoruba proverb would say, when crisis comes, put your ear to the ground, offer a libation, and wait there, wait there. Those are not the skills we're taught as university-going, people. We're taught to solve the problem. And that's a very impoverished way of meeting a world that is rich.
And I think that just having this as something that you can now hold, some of the words that you've said, I wish I had heard them before I experienced what is deemed by the DSM-4 psychiatric manual as an acute dissociative disorder, and only having accessible to me the narrative of clinical Western psychological thinking, and seeing it as a pathology alone. Something to be cured. And maybe if I had these kinds of words and thinking behind them accessible to me, I would have experienced that state and the subsequent 12 very differently.
Thank you, bro. You could say that, but you could also say, because I think of time as slushy and circular. So that even the desire that maybe if I heard this, things would be better. Well, maybe the past is still yet to come. Maybe time doesn't progress so straightforwardly. Maybe time is awkward. It doesn't have grace. It doesn't work in high heels. Maybe it uses slippers and stuff, and it's it has no shoes. So that's what I would say to that long game may just as well be. I would see it in two ways. It's beautiful, but it could also be in reinforcing, reinscribing the modern desire to return to a state, where I can pull back and correct things. I think that you can do that even now, that the past is still ahead of you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you both for this. We're starting, I feel, to outline this tendency of modern Westerners, and I like to point to the part modern, because maybe also Westerners back in the day, they also had a way of feeling and seeing that was more similar to the ones that you are describing now. But so if we point to this modern Western way to differentiate ourselves and separate ourselves from nature, to then dominate it and ravage it even, versus a more indigenous or older way to deprioritize humans and see everything as interrelated. So what can we say about the level of maturity of this approach, or the different levels of maturity or spiritual maturity of these two different approaches to our relation towards our environment and everything around us? Pat, how would you describe these different levels of maturity? What is that is more mature or less mature about the two different approaches?
Maturity, spiritual maturity. So my clan grandfather, he said this thing that I think about all the time. He said, so here we are, holy earth surface walkers. That's the Dene translated from the Dene for human being. Here we are, holy earth surface walkers, dazzled by creation, coming upon temptation. and so this was our state pre colonialism. So this is a human state, according, as I think about him and how he was talking about it. And one of the things that I've been really fascinated by has to do with my daughter's work. She's getting her PhD in traditional land management practices, and so she's talking about how when they take these core samples out of the earth, and the deeper down you go, the farther back in time you go, and so they're looking at this fossilized pollen that's in these core earth samples, And so they can tell what kinds of life was going on at different times. Or anyway, that's the idea. And so they're finding that in some places they go back and there's very little biodiversity. And then here come the human beings. They show up, and all of a sudden the biodiversity just like explodes. And we're both so delighted by this because it's speaking to a human presence that modern world right now is sort of longing for and dreaming of, this possibility of how could we be a being that actually causes life to thrive, rather than this being that comes and destroys everything it touches. So I just keep thinking about how we have been as we travel through time, and so I picture this continent that I'm on as like a single thriving organism without nation states. And so I've been really feeling into what it's like to be here in its feral, undefined nation states. And so there's these pathways that travel from Alaska to Antarctica. They're ancient roads. And in our books, they're called trade routes. And I keep saying, well, the Spirit said to me, those aren't trade routes, those are kinship routes. Kinship routes. And so I picture all these peoples traveling these roads, sharing their understanding of how to be a human being that causes life to thrive. So there's this incredible cross-pollination going on between all the humans. And so this is why when the boats arrive, no matter what part of the continent they arrive to, there's always the same thing that they say. They say, "Oh my God, we found Eden." It's undespoiled, and it's implied that it's untouched by human hands because I don't know. I don't really understand. I mean, that's how it was always presented to me in my history books. And so this is a story that I want to interrupt because I want to say, no, it's not that they came upon lands that had been untouched by human hands. There was like millions of human beings here, but they were being on the continent in a different way. But did they never overreach? Did they never deplete resources? Did they never have wars? No, they did. There's evidence of civilizations rising and falling here that the world doesn't talk about. The mound societies and such are almost, it's like all the archaeological and anthropological evidence is so disruptive to the narrative that it's invisible. It can't be entertained. It can't be acknowledged. But so I keep thinking about, well, what were we like? What has been? And then I think about this idea that, we've already been through many worlds. Maybe you hear people talk about the fifth world or the sixth world or the fifth sun. And so that says to me that humanity has traveled through a lot more time than modern world gives us credit for, hundreds of thousands of years. Every all these discoveries keep coming and that time keeps getting pushed back about how long human civilization has been around. But my clan grandfather talks about how we lost one of the worlds to a flood. Many cultures talk about that. And he says, we know why. He says the reason that we lost that world was because men and women believed they could live without each other. And that created such havoc that that we ended up losing a world over it and had to begin again. And so we have these stories of passing through worlds. And so I don't know that I see us as, like indigenous cultures as the mature ones, exactly. I see us as, I mean, the construct that we are in is an interbeing. I would agree with Thich Nhat Hanh there. We are an interbeing. So I say we're in the ultimate three-legged race where, you know, I can't be well if you're not well. And that doesn't just go for us humans here. I can't be well if the water's not well. I can't be well if the buffalo aren't well. I can't be well if the dragonflies aren't well. And so I feel like we are in this constant I guess I'll say endeavor, striving, although I feel Bio maybe wriggling in his seat a little over that, but but I feel like we're trying to find our homeostasis with this interbeingness, and it's a journey, and we keep finding new ways to find separation, and so these different calamities befall us, and sometimes it's these people over here, and sometimes it's those people over there, sometimes it's the men, sometimes it's the women, you know, it's like all these different combinations. But I just keep feeling like at some point we will come to this a homeostasis, not necessarily in a place where we just are static and everything stays the same. I think we continue to keep moving, but in what quality? In what quality and with how much suffering? So maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you, Pat. And yeah, this journey, this learning, this evolution that is not linear, as Bio say, time is messy, we go backwards, then we go forward. So we start to see these movements that have many directions and that will take us somewhere at some point. But so maybe, Bio, would you like to add something to this, like this way of seeing the world as interconnected or separated? What can we say about these two different ways of feeling and seeing?
I was just thinking of Patsy and I'm wriggling in my chair. I actually, and Pat and I have been having conversations for years now, and I'm always honored to, like I wrote to her, or shared with her recently, that the day that I stopped wanting to listen to her would be a dangerous day for me personally, and that the worlds that I try to artistically articulate, you know, cannot be eloquent if her voice isn't part of it. So I'm not wriggling. I'm excited. It's just to add this then, that I feel there's something awkward about emergence, and the word awk, you know, comes from this lack of grace, like this stumbling. You know, the nerd in those Hollywood movies, it's the one who is in the straight white male, you know, with shiny teeth. It's the one with who doesn't know how to, you know, dunk a ball or something. This notion of the awkward is how I feel invited to play with these tropes of separation, and of this notion, this Thich Nhat Hanhian notion of interbeing. And yet I'm very reluctant to withdraw or to find some cushion to view these ideas as so disparate. Like, here's interbeing on one end, where all the good people live, and here's separation on one end, where all the terrible people are. So if you're a separationist, then you're a dinosaur, and you're not woke, and you're not there yet, ontologically speaking or spiritually speaking. While these guys, the interbeings, are the good people. So I'm very reluctant to binarize the world in that way, or see dualisms in that way. I read recently that a pig, well, it's not a pig, it's a boar, or some kind of, some kind of pig animal, something, that is known as a poisonous species, um, harmful to the ecosystem, is actually valuable in a way that people are now discovering, that they found out that this being is not as detrimental as we thought it was. There are other examples I could throw at you of how the world might use a flu, the flu, a virus, to create something that wasn't there before, like plastic, or the Kerala women in India, how they took plastic and biscuits and sweet wrappers during the coronavirus pandemic, which we're still in, and they built an altar on a beach, and they called it an altar to the corona goddess. You see, I'm caught up in this ongoing worship of how the world reinvents itself, how nature itself is never still, right? So I'm reluctant again to binarize things and say this is separation on one end and this is entanglement on one end. To me, entanglement is what separation is often doing. and separation is often performing entanglement. They're not ontological registers that are so cut off from each other that they do not feed each other sometimes. And yet that's not to say they're not different, right? It's an entirely different ballgame when we speak about the practices that are informed by these sites of power. Definitely, modernity seems to be the search for permanence, like to name things in a categorical way for all time, to stratify and identify, bodies and body types and create typologies, and to just fix, draw a line in the sand in a way that is secure, that gives us confidence. That's how our notions of time, and economics and education, that's the spiritual place is informed by. And yet at the same time, I feel modernity is longing for something beyond its very thankless task of naming things, like a cosmic librarian. It's longing for something beyond this activity. It doesn't know how to do that. And so maybe the most benevolent thing to do with modernity is to compost it, right? Is to introduce it to its peers and say, no, 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 no. These beings that you've identified as being alone, right? They are actually ecosystems within ecosystems within ecosystems that are hiding, lurking within this trope of individuality, right? So now I understand, beyond my Christocentric training, I understand that I'm not an individual. No, I'm the intergenerational longings, traumas, and gifts of worlds to come and worlds that have passed. So I don't know how to see myself as an individual anymore with a soul that is inside myself. To me, the soul is my relationship with the world and with others. Now the question would be, the question I would ask is, which one is better? No, that's not the question I would ask. That's too good and evilly. The question I would ask is, what kind of world does each create? Modernity has created this world of concrete separation. I feel the world that we're longing for, the world that climate chaos is pointing to, the world that a pandemic stealing through flesh is pointing to, is the world that can only come about when we humble ourselves, when we decenter ourselves from the picture, and we notice we're not the only ones in the room. So I would want to listen to an elder speak, an elder like Pat, that would say, there's a vision here. Let's come about it together. Let's listen to our ancestors. That's the word I want to sit. My world doesn't have truth as a final trope. Truth is emergent and dancing and waltzing with things, right? But truth in modernity is a final staple clinical element. And I'm tired of that. I want the other side of things.
You're saying something, bio, that I want to add on about not being an individual, a singular entity, being a part of an ecosystem, yes. But you know what? One of the things that this virus and this pandemic business has brought me to is I've been inquiring from the herd animals, like, how do you do it? Like, what? How do you keep it together when things are picking off your members on an ongoing basis? You know, because they're always losing somebody on the edges, right, from the predators. So I've been trying to tune into like the reindeer and the deer and the elk, and just ask, like, so what's the right mindset to have here about this kind of loss? And so one of the things that I've been feeling in it is this sense of, well, one, what's it like to be part of a herd versus individuals achieving? And so that's like a different feeling. But the other part is really feeling, and I keep using this gesture, it's like I'm this is me in the middle here, but I'm moving as like 7 generations. So I'm starting with 7 generations. And so for me, there's 3 behind me and there's 3 ahead of me. I mean, we could, and so that influence is how, if there's an entity for me right now, it's actually 7 generations. Yeah. Which is still making it a finite sort of piece, but it's beyond me, right?
So, it's beyond so just a solitary thing.
It's a new place. Yeah. It's a new place for me to really spend time really feeling into that.
You folks have so much density in whatever you share that this is going to be one of those sessions where people pause, replay, rewind, rewatch. And thank you for this. I would like us to go even further on beyond crystal-centric training and see what the internet has in store for us. So we like to dip into the virtual sphere because it is a participatory space. It's really democratized. People make memes all over the world. They mash up different cultures and images and ways of speaking, and there's a new language being birthed on the internet with all of its problems. But one tool it has and offers is humor, and the role of mischief and humor and laughter in spiritual practices, something that we are very interested in. But first, to take us there, we're going to put up some memes to see what the internet is producing on this topic. And for the people who are maybe listening to us, I'm just going to give a quick verbal description of what's happening. So in the first image, we have somebody praying, saying, "Please, ancestors, I need your guidance." And then there is a prehistoric amphibious fish which just has flopping noises. And somebody responds, "Whoa, we went too far back." And then somebody else says, I think I still want to hear them out." All right, next up, we have somebody praying in church, "God, I could really use a little guidance." And then the spot of light comes and there's a little person there, and the little person puts on some shades and starts dancing. And there's an angel wondering from above saying, "What is happening?" And there's an incarnation of God saying, "I don't know, man. She asked for a little guidance." Next up, we have we all know enlightenment, but we also have unenlightenment with the adage, "The light in me acknowledges the dimness in you." A little passive aggressive yoga narrative there. And then we have a cat with a very open third eye with a seatbelt. "Universe, all of these hardships and feelings are only going to help take you to the next level of consciousness." Me as the cat. "Let's go, batch. I'm ready." Then we have 2 images. The first one says "Before Spiritual Awakening," and there's a kid with a boot on his face. And then there's a second image that says after spiritual awakening, where we zoom out and we see that, in fact, the hand is in the boot. We're our own obstacles oftentimes. And we have two kids, one a monk, other a AC/DC lover and smoker, saying, and we have the caption reading, when you on a traditional spiritual path and your homie's not, but you still ride for them because you understand duality. Internet trying to process non-binariness and circuitous paths. And finally, little word play never harmed anybody. We start with, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and together we will rise. Let us pray ramen for the culinary pun world, with a little spiritual sprinkling. So, you know, we see that the power some lightness and levity can bring into the story. What I would like from you folks to touch on, in modern Western white circles, there's often a very serious, stern, straight edge approach to spirituality. And Chiara and I have in our experiences with non-Western tradition found that humor and the weird are allies in the spiritual realm and investigations. So Pat, what would you say the role of humor and the weird could be in your spiritual wanderings?
One of the things that I really am sad about not knowing my language very well is it takes a pretty deep level to really get all the humor going on. There's apparently we're like master punsters with our language, and it's very, very body. And so it's always fascinating to me to watch the grandmas sitting around doing what they're doing, and they're talking, and I can tell by the way they're laughing that there's like this whole layer of stuff going on that I'm missing entirely. But so I'm sad that I don't get to be a part of that. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is all the humor around body, like BODY, and sexuality. And I think that there is sometimes it's so interesting to me that Christianity and the way of, sitting still and being good and trying to be silent, well, somebody's leading that whole way. Even though much of the world rejects that, it still dominates. It still dominates so many spaces, the way of it. And so I still feel like there's this deep association with, if you're gonna approach the divine, that, it has to be in this puritanical way. And that goes even for yoginis and at least in Western world, right? And so I'm always very curious about what it's like to depart from that in the sweat lodges. I remember the other thing that was coming to mind is being in a sweat, and there was one of our leaders for that. When somebody would pass gas in the sweat, he would, which happens, it happens. He would always say, "The toothless one has spoken," and so that. To give you an example of the kind of humor I'm talking about. So maybe I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. The toothless one. We'll use next time I'm in a super austere yoga class and the toothless one speaks. And here's to body grandmas. So is mine, and it's always been. I credit her to, instilling me with an appreciation for dirty sexual connotations. WDY. Bio, any thoughts on the matter?
I'm just taken by the toothless one has spoken. That is just that should be the name of a book or something. Yeah, that's just great. The Yoruba people have a trickster whose name is Eshu. I speak about him regularly. Him, her, it. I think he resists, she resists, it resists, any form of final identification. There are poems that we sing about Eshu, that Eshu walks into a palace, and lo and behold, I don't know where the lo and behold got into the picture, very Shakespearean, but lo and behold, the palace is too tiny. And then he crawls into a nutshell, into a tiny knot. And now he can stretch his arms. There was always this idea of breaking the expectations, tricking the senses, which always is an occasion for laughter and humor. None of the Calvinian spirituality that is about earning your salvation, earning rapture. So I wasn't a very humorous person. Oh, I think I grew up humorous until I started to take my Christianity seriously. And a wall just sprouted between me and my family. I would read a Finis Dake Bible. Finis Dake was a 19th century American preacher who memorized the Bible and was so gifted with the scriptures. And he had this very literalist interpretation of things. He wrote this commentary with the Bible and I would burn candles every night, studying each verse of the scriptures and the commentary, thousands and thousands of pages. And then I would read, what's his name? Charles Finney, who was an 18th century revivalist, Asa Mahan, all these white mustachioed men who always looked to the side when they took photographs of them. Very serious. Those were my mentors, you see. I took those worlds seriously. And what that caught me off from was this joyful acknowledgement that God isn't some faraway alien being, Gandalfian figure that is distant, distant from everything that is now and thick and pressing and urgent. Catherine Keller, she's a theologian, she uses this phrase, apophatic entanglement, which is just busy talk to many of us. Not to me, I like that phrase, but to many of us, it might be busy talk for how the divine or the sacred is mixed into an immanent within the ordinary, and within the humorous and the joyful and the playful, so that it's in the playful moments. And maybe even Jesus said something about bring the children to me, right? It's the children that make up the kingdom of God. There is a sense in which we have practiced seriousness so much that we forget what spirituality is yearning for. And I wonder if children and humor and play and the tragedy of clowns and stuff might reintroduce us back into.
Thank you so much. Tragedy of clowns, noted.
So, wow, thank you. We can move to the last question now. And I wanted to say, in a way, we managed to talk about many things, just referencing the pandemic without fully addressing it. And it feels good, actually, that for once we almost glossed over it and talked about other things that are extremely relevant to what we are living and that can really support this experience of being through these crazy times in our generation, and navigating the difficulties and the challenges, also thanks to a spiritual practice or a spiritual quest, I would say, that would help us to know what to do, what to say on the daily life. And in this sense, I would like to ask you if you have a message for the youth, because the youth is one of the groups of people that right now is especially suffering from the weight of isolation and the uncertainty. And they will soon inherit a particularly challenging reality, to say the least. And we need to, I think that they need the support of all directions and lineages and teachings that they can. And so also considering how amazing this new generation is proving to be, I would like to ask Pat, do you have something to tell them? Would you like to tell them, to give them a message?
Well, it's my understanding that nobody comes to Earth for no good reason. So I think about that, and it's such a profound thing to be placed on this Mother Earth here, to be given a seat on the sacred hoop of life. And that has always been a very special seat, I'm going to say. Some of my elders have said that this Mother Earth is the heart of the cosmos, and everything looks this way. So in that sense, for some people, the Earth is the center and everything revolves around the Earth. So in terms of consciousness, in terms of delight and the joy possibility of Earth. So I think that's one of my coping mechanisms for it in general, is to zoom out. So I'm like literally zooming out into the cosmos to have a look at the situation. And so when I think about that, I think about how incredible it is to be a human being here, to actually walk upon her, and to have a consciousness that can interact in relationship with all of the relations here. So that's always been true, and it's still true. But I want to say that, you know, to sign up to come now, that's how I look at it. You know, I always picture myself pulling on Spirit's coat sleeve saying, "Put me in, coach, put me in, put me in. I think I could do something over here." And so I trust that. I trust that whatever my soul, my spirit saw that would, you know, that I could feel or be or do. I don't know that it's always about accomplishment, but there's something that I bring here. And so that's what I see with the young people, is I just want to say, man, it just blows me away that you came here now, because it is a time, an unusual time. I don't know, maybe it's all been kind of unusual, but it's in terms of interrupting this idea of coming to completion, as Bio is saying, you know, this orderly coming to completion that we have been believing that we're on, and we're not, and we're being shown that. I just really admire the young people that are here right now, and I want to say that there's something that you came to bring. And I think for me, you know, my prayer in the morning, I ask for all the helpers to come and be a part of my day, and to inform me. All those that serve life, light, and love, I'm inviting into my thinking, into my feeling, into my body and joining in spirit. And I ask, show me how to participate fully in the very highest possibility for life, light, and love today. Show me how I can do that. And so when I do that, I then trust what arises. So, when you, Ivan, and Chiara, when you invited me to come and do this with Bio, I say, oh, they're moving in the very highest possibility for life, light, and love. I guess I better show up, and so here we are. So I have a trust in what arises because I've asked for I've declared what I'm available for, and I do that every day. So it's just getting deeper and deeper, and so that's something that's very helpful to me. But also, I can't address every single thing that's going on in the world, and there's so much going on, but that needs to be addressed, it seems to me. But I have my part, and as long as I attend to that, then I know that I am fulfilling, what I came here to do, what I thought I could do. So I'm asking for that guidance. I'm learning about what my strengths are and how I can participate in beauty, in the continuation of beauty and harmony here. And then when I know that I'm attending to that, the rest is riding on the current, riding in the, surfing that wave, I guess, and just seeing what happens. But I feel at this point that it is possible to have a sense of that you are taking care of what you can take care of, and I'm doing that now. And even though there's lots going on and there's lots of uncertainty, that's just what I want to know, is that I'm upholding the honor of being human being in the way that was given to me to do.
Thank you, Pat. This is not just for the youth, but for all of us, this attitude of being open and trusting that this wave we can surf because we are here now, and knowing how to ask for help. This is all very precious guidance that we can receive at the moment. And what about you, Bio? A message for the youth?
Let me come clean and say I've never really had it easy with the term youth. Maybe because of the circles that I work in and work with. It's not just, I think the term youth, not to belabor the point, but the term youth it's not just a filler space for young people. I feel there's a way that our modern civilization practices the category, so to speak, so that it's more than just a definition, an age definition. It becomes a way to show up in the world. And that's quite evident to those people who are working with giant intergovernmental institutions like UNESCO, where a youth conference is about young people showing up entrepreneurially with suits, ready to take on the world of business and stuff. So I'm very, very reluctant to give a message to the youth. Why I would also say that is I feel what we're witnessing with the pandemic is like an invasion. No, I don't want to use the language of war. I take that back. It's like the interruption of the normal, right? It's like the world erupts and kicks back against, and I've said this previously, kicks back against, the ways that we've been conducting business. Another way I would frame it is the insurgency of the invisible. And these are not just metaphors. They're ways that I would describe the world resisting our categories, so that in a sense, I do not even know where the old starts from and where the youth ends or where the young ends. Everything now seems messed up, and things are now colliding with each other. Our sense of time misplaced, so that the old now lives in the young and the young in the old. Anyway, just needed to mention that. But what I would say, what I would invite at this point is looking out against a world that where definitions are no longer easy, so to speak, and we cannot return to those easy lines in the sand. I would invite a slowing down. I would invite us to notice this as at the risk of, voicing this as something to just use, like Ivan described a while ago. I don't want to use and like an ATM machine, God, and just return and say, okay, I got an answer. At the risk of doing that, I want to use the word opportunity, right? Opportunity, that this is an opportunity. Crisis events in my cosmology are how the world, in its vast and complex intelligence, how the world gets richer, how the world knows itself. Just like a glitch in the program, it's not the bad place in the program. It's how the program understands itself. It's how it congeals and orgasmically meets itself, if you will. In the same way, I feel that this is an opportunity that we are being presented with new questions, new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing. Thought is being compelled in new directions, right? And if we just rush back into the normal and just take on the tools that we dropped when we went on lockdown, we risk reinscribing the suffering of people around the world, including the so-called dominant, privileged peoples around the world, because it's not working for any of us. So I say, as a person from the so-called global South, from the continent that is usually bastardized and used as a dumping ground for the dreams of the West, I would say that this is a time for us to meet ourselves as if for the first time, right? Recently, some scientists discovered what they now called Adam's event. They named it after Douglas Adams, who wrote the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And why did they do that? Because at the end of that book, Adams suggested that the answer to all of creation is the number 42. So they actually found, these scientists, that 42,000 years ago, there was a geomagnetic event. And this geomagnetic event was climate shift and, the world territorially suffering a fever, if you will. And everything was driven underground. But coinciding with this crisis was this upswing of creativity. That's when they noticed signs and symbols and cave drawings and all of that. So crisis is a time of destruction, yes, but it's also a time of unprecedented creativity. And I would invite us that this is our time to slow down, to reduce the scale of our progress narratives, and to ask questions like we've never asked before. I would say that this is our time for us to make our bodies edible, right? Our bodies edible for the more than human around us, to submit ourselves in humility to the more than human around us. So to anyone who's listening, if you're 92 and you're youth, and you're 16 and you're old, right? Because I'm no longer speaking to individuals, I'm speaking to territories, principalities and powers, right? If you are somewhere within this network of new inquiry, right? Nothing fits anymore. If things feel awkward for you, then you're in a good place, all right? And I pray with Pat and with all the beautiful souls gathered around this conversation that the spirits, the ancestors, the archetypes, everything good that could support your quest will be gathered around you so that you might find new questions and thereby find new worlds. That's where I'll end.
Whew. So as I am in rural Greece, I'm going to channel some Diogenes with my lantern here, and I'm going to try and do the impossible, which is a little wrap up of what we have today. Thank you for making it very difficult for me. So After speaking to the two of you, I really feel like Chihiro in Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. Okay, the light is falling out. Backup plan. Abort mission. All right, so I'm gonna avoid my technical difficulties and remove the, okay, here we go. So back to wrap-ups. As humanity, we've come a long way from feeling that Christian dogma of original sin is the only answer. There are other lineages and other stories, like the story of original beauty, and that we can be sung back into harmony and we can return to original beauty, even if we stray and we do wrong. There is deep liberation to depart from this original dogma that Christianity has imposed on us. We can learn a lot from life in the desert, in forests, beside waters. We should speak to sheep herders. We should connect to the orishas, whatever our traditions might be. We could see the world in a through different mythological eyes. The land we walk on is a map of meanings. And we should listen to trees, because this could birth important knowledge, but we need to learn how to do this. Colonially labeled pagan traditions went underground to work with the world, and they knew that the world is constantly animated. The world is much like a colossal compost heap, an ecosystem of ecosystems, and we try to boil it down to our personal little anxieties and crises, our tiny little yoga bubbles. So let's break those bubbles, including our imprisonment by the bubble of sanity. The tools that we make help us for a little while, but they don't stay subservient for too long, so we need to keep reinventing them. The ordinary is way richer than the extraordinary, something that we seem to forget. And time is slushy and circular, and it's awkward. And it sometimes, wear slippers, but sometimes no shoes. And we need to realize that the past is still ahead of us. We are in the ultimate three-legged race, and I can't be well if you are not well, and the buffalo and the dragonflies are not well. And we're searching for homeostasis, but we're constantly stumbling into separation. And yes, there is awkwardness around emergence, and we constantly butt heads with binarisms. And modernity creates a world of separation, but what if we humble and decenter ourselves? What will the world look like then? How does Christian and dogmatic puritanism dominate us and our narratives? And we need to listen when the toothless one speaks, and remember the tricksters, and that the divine and the sacred is mixed with playfulness. And to the boom counterculture and beyond, let's ask ourselves how to be in service of life and light and love, and how to participate in the continuation of beauty, and just ride that current. And perhaps a message to the youth today is do away with the notion of youth. Youth is something we practice, and we're taught how to practice. And maybe we need to reinvent that as well. And remember the glitch, perhaps the pandemic being seen as one. A glitch in the program is a way for the program to know itself. It is how it orgasmically congeals to know itself. And this is an opportunity for the world to know itself. So let us slow down, slow the pace, and try to meet ourselves as if for the first time.
But the takeaway of all that is the honoring of the toothless one. We honor the toothless one.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a rich conversation, multi-layered, and still open for more takeaways and more pearls and special gold nuts that we can still find there. And so I would like to thank Pat so much for making time today at the beginning of this day for her to be with us. And I would like to speak about something that she is supporting at the moment, which is the buying of the Dine land. You will find the link in the comments. And also another link you will find there is the Dine COVID Relief Fund. Maybe, Pat, you want to say something about this before we close?
Yes, just to say that my Dene Nation has been hit very hard with the COVID virus. At one point, we had the highest number of cases in the United States for quite a while. And so, I mean, things were already a little bit difficult. People have to haul water, and some of our windmills are broken, and some of them are going dry. And so I have a ceremony brother who's doing his best to tend to about 40 or 50 families. And so we keep sending funds to him to bring water, to bring firewood, to bring food out to the people, the elders in rural areas. And so I'd be really grateful if you were inclined to make a donation to that effort out that way. It really is helping, and it's really critical at this point. It's hard for us to lose our ceremonial elders and our language speakers and those with the cultural knowledge. And this is happening with Indigenous peoples worldwide. So it's a big loss for humanity for us to lose that library of understanding. And so, yeah, we'd appreciate any help. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And Bio, for you, I would like to mention that you are part of the founder, actually, of the Emergence Network, and also a course that you're about to start that is called We Will Dance with Mountains. Would you like to say something about this before saying goodbye?
Actually, the course just ended. So, and my sister Pat was part of it. So I'm always very shy about giving the conversation for the next one, especially when I haven't heard that there's going to be a next one, heard from the More Than Human. So don't come yet. If you're going to be part of that course, you will be called. But thank you for bringing that out. And just for people to know about what just happened, you can visit the course website. But I want to draw attention, add my voice. Before I do that, just to mention about the Emergence Network, and that we are a constellation of tricksters around the world that are creating and making room for beautiful projects, from the favelas in Brazil down to India and South Africa. We're creating room for post-activist departures from the normal way of engaging with power dynamics. So our website is there. We're refurbishing the whole thing and getting ready for some kind of beautiful work and networking to happen. And if you'd like to support us, please visit us. But more urgently, I would add my voice to Pat's and say, please, if you have something to spare and to give in the spirit of gift and this complexifying intelligence, let's give to Pat's project. It's very important that we do that. We direct our resources to supporting land and building structures that help our land, our communities to thrive. So let's do that together. We're all in this together.
We're all in this together. Damn right. And I want to thank you both once again. It was a pleasure to spend this evening with you. Now the sun has officially set where I am in Greece. And yes, just deep, sincere gratitude to all of you, to the Boom team, to the festival that keeps us going, even though we can't physically meet yet, to Unite, who's going to stream and has been streaming our content. Check out some of our other episodes, and we'll have more inquiries into the liminal weird spaces of the world coming up. And check out the Boom Toolkit for COVID. Pat was also one of our interviewees. So if you can't get enough of Pat, there's more. And including the Liminal Village talk from a couple of years ago. So lots of love to all of you. And thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we have to use Pat's ghetto sign off.
Oh, did you see that?
Yes, it was great.
Well
Drop
done,
the mic.
everyone.
Just drop the mic.
It was a drop
the mic. The mic isn't dropping though. Just
This needs to be the last image. I'm sorry.
Thank you for a wonderful conversation. It was beautiful. Pat, thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Bio. Always
Yeah.
a pleasure.